to this video from Southwest DMR about receive lists on DMR radios. Reminder, each frequency on TDMA, that's DMR, is split into two. We call these slot 1 and slot 2. Only one person can transmit on a slot at any given time. The talk group you've selected is a filter so that you can choose what you hear and what you can't. However, if you're using a repeater, you'll probably want to use receive lists and group all the channels for each slot that you want to listen to. This will allow you to hear transmissions on any talk group on that slot in the order chosen in the list. This will also allow you to reply to any transmission you hear, even if it's on a different talk group, but this is dependent on your radio. One thing to remember with using DMR radios, and this is something that a lot of people find difficult to get used to, especially experienced operators, is you need to remember to watch the display of your radio and always announce the talk group that you're on. There's a lot of people out there that are using non-display radios, or particularly people that are partially sighted, that will not necessarily be able to see the talk group that you're transmitting on. So it's important that you announce this. Although the protocol on DMR is that you should announce the talk group you are using when putting out calls on calling channels, this is still not being observed by many people, and this does cause confusion. People have not looked at the display and therefore have not realized that you've transmitted on a different talk group. They don't have a display, or that they're simply guessing which talk group to use. The key thing to bear in mind is that most radios can be set up to talk back on the same talk group as the channel that they've received the last call on. Now, with most radios there is a time limit to this, and it may only be a fraction of a second, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, so that you have a short period of time in which to go back to that person on. So that's something to check in your settings if you're unsure. Here's an example of a radio display that you might get if you were working through a repeater. In this example, GB7KM. You've got talk group 1 selected and the radio is currently idle, so you're not receiving and you're not transmitting, so it just simply says the name of the talk group that you've got selected. When you put a call out, your display is going to show the talk group that you're transmitting on. Now, it's important that you always watch this. Whenever you're transmitting, make sure that it's transmitting on the channel that you expect it to be transmitting on. So in this example, you've got talk group 1 selected, you're putting out a call, and as it quite rightly says, you're transmitting on talk group 1. When you finish your transmission, the radio will return to the idle mode until somebody calls you. Somebody else now puts a call through the radio and they're calling SECU. However, this time they're talking on talk group 235. Now you can still hear that transmission because they're on the same slot as you are. So they're using the same frequency and the filter is turned off so that you know there is activity and there's somebody out there. Now, although you've got talk group 1 selected, you might, if you go back to the person quickly enough, be able to talk back to them using talk group 235 without having to change the selection on your radio. So when they've finished, if you press your push to talk button straight away, you should be able to transmit on talk group 235, and again the display will show you this. If, however, the display says that you are transmitting on talk group 1, you need to release your PTT key and change to talk group 235. Using receive list will save battery power. It allows multiple talk groups to be opened at once, which makes it much easier for you to monitor your radio without trying to use scan lists, which are unreliable and drain your battery. If you want to be able to monitor traffic coming in on, for example, talk group 9 and talk group 10, you can add both those talk groups to a single receive list. It wouldn't matter if you set your radio to talk group 9 or talk group 10, you would hear the transmissions on either. If you set your radio to talk group 11 and talk group 11 is not in that receive list, you will not hear the transmissions on talk group 9 and talk group 10. So depending on how your radio is configured, if you key up promptly, you should be able to reply on the same talk group that you just heard coming from your radio. Now that does depend on the make and model of radio, but from our experience, even the cheap Hytera radios, the cheap Retevis RT3 radios will work in this fashion. When using receive group lists on Phoenix repeaters, it's most common to set the calling groups and all of slot 1 into one receive list and then use a second receive list for slot 2. You shouldn't use the same receive list over both slots, because that does create technical problems. Now if, for example, you wanted to reduce the amount of transmissions you were hearing and you didn't want to listen to transmissions on talk group 80 and talk group 81 on talk group 129, the user activated talk groups, you could remove those out of the calling list, so you would never hear those. And if you kept it, for example, on screen on talk groups 1, 2, 13 and 235, you would only ever hear calling channels if sat on a calling channel, and that's often the preferred way for a lot of people. And certainly on slot 2, again, most people will set it to the most common talk groups that they want to hear traffic on. So generally talk group 9 and their local regional repeater, in our case talk group 810. You can order the list into an order of preference, so that if, for example, you wanted to hear transmissions on talk group 810 before you heard transmissions on talk group 9, you'd make sure that 810 is higher in the list. So in other words, if people were having QSOs on talk group 9 and on talk group 810, you would need to specify by moving that up higher in the list that you want 810 to come before talk group 9. I hope this makes things a little bit clearer in the world of using receive lists on DMR radios. If you like what you've heard and you'd like to support the Southwest DMR cause, please visit our website at www.gb7km.co.uk and contribute or feel like joining us, and we have a unique Facebook group that you can also join if you're a paying subscriber. Thank you very much.